Hello there.
Yes. Hello, hello.
Hello. I'm just having to write a sentence. Bum, bum, bum. Upload a screenshot here. Just you and me so far, huh?
Okay, I thought I think Fabien will also join soon because I talked to him today.
Oh yeah, he usually does, which is great. Highly appreciated.
Can you see my video, by the way?
I cannot see you at the moment now.
Okay. And then I will rejoin.
Okay. Ah, here I can see you.
Yes. Okay.
I just have had a meeting with a friend. I know from long ago we took masters in HCI together, so of course lots of thoughts comes up, and I have to just make sure they're properly listed.
Uh-huh. Oh, you just got out of this other call.
Yeah. No, I was in a meeting in town actually.
Oh, okay. Is that a bird in the background?
There was, yes.
Okay.
Boom. I think I'm done now, so that was good. Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right. Yeah, very good. Oh, who have we got here? Fabienne. Excellent. And I forgot to put my system on silent. We'll do that. Kind of interesting, the focus mode thing. I hope Randall joins us today. I really want to know if he really has had the vision on his desk for a year, as the rumor goes, or if he was kidding, or what the status is with that. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, nice one.
It's coffee, it's espresso on top of tonic. Have you tried it? It's really, really good in the heat.
Oh, wow. Never tried. That sounds great. I love tonic. I love coffee.
There was apparently a Norwegian barista in Sweden who came up with it. It's just so bizarre. It's kind of fun watching people have their first taste. Sorry, my projector's on the screen. You know, their expression goes through so many cycles of, what the hell is this?
I can imagine.
You both got my email about the Hypertext conference, right?
Yes, indeed. And I was even thinking it would be nice to come, but timing-wise, it's not ideal for me.
Emily and I and Edgar were planning to either go by train to Rome from London or from Malta/Sicily. If we go from London, of course, we'll stop by Paris. So that might be better timing to meet up.
Yeah, could be right. I was thinking even I don't remember what prompted this, but I was reading a paper this afternoon, and I thought, oh, it would be nice to have an in-person either demo day or hackathon or something like this still. So I don't think we should give up on that impetus.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, Brandel, finally, the last time it's been so brief, have you really had a Vision Pro yourself? you are an absolute monster. How long have you had it? How long have you been keeping a straight face and saying, "Oh, I have a Quest 1. I don't know VR stuff."
I've never said I don't know VR stuff.
No, but
No, no one is less modest than me about that. But no, I've been on the Vision Pro programs for a little over 3 years.
Ooh, that's a
are we still friends?
No, this is why I came to the Future of Text in the first place and said, what would you do with more space?
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting. I was lucky enough yesterday, Father's Day, I ended up spending the pretty much entire day with Bob Stein, founder of Voyager. We were walking around London having a fantastic time. We need to spend more time with him. He has that different generation kind of insight into the kinds of things we do. And he said, yeah, it's so bizarre. People ask me if I'm going to buy one. Why would I not, says the 77-year-old. Why would I not buy this when it's the most exciting new media thing in the world?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely transformative.
That's,
No, I've been working on. My role is to develop.
hang on, I just want Peter to know what you're talking about. Peter, can you hear us?
Yes.
So Brandel, whom I love and hate, has had the Quest Pro for quite a long time now and managed
Vision
to,
Pro.
us intimate friends, keep it secret. So he's talking about it now. Okay.
Vision Pro, and
What did I say?
I have Quest Pro.
Oh my God. Okay. You're just confusing me so much. Yeah, the real thing, the Vision Pro.
So, I mean, to be clear, for example, none of us knew the name until the day, so we didn't call it that. But also, people didn't have something that resembled the finished product for a good while. There were many much coarser prototypes, but a general sort of promise of the level of capability that it would have, and then, but also the sort of set of priorities that the product would have. I probably shouldn't be saying this on a recorded thing, but yeah, like it's essentially what's out there.
I guess. But I just wanted to show you this thing here because maybe, and this is to the whole group, because obviously I'm all about PDF and visual meta and stuff, but this is author exporting HTML too. And because author is based on proper rules, like this is a heading and stuff, it exports it properly. And there are so many web things going on. In this case, it didn't actually include visual meta, which is hilarious. But the point is that maybe we should, as a community, look a little bit on ways to make really useful HTML of documents for this environment, and then work on reader systems for that. Because a lot of the web stuff obviously is very heavy. All these layers of CSS and JavaScript and all of that stuff. Whatever happened to an HTML page that maybe a plugin in Safari could really bring to life.
Well, people can build extensions for Safari. That actually might be an interesting thing for a reader to look at. Is on the web you have the ability to create an absolutely just like full permission keys to the castle, which has tremendous room for abuse, but it means that you have the ability to have something that is able to run over every single web page that a user looks at. I think for the most part, Apple presents them as being frivolous, like just changing every instance of the word fish into an emoji for fish. But that kind of power has incredible implications, and it would also carry those implications into the ability to do something spatial with it as well. So if you're interested in transforming pages and not just your own, then that's a really great option.
Well, I mean, Mr. Fabian here is all about web, and all that stuff. And I do think we need to, in the community, start using each other's stuff. So right now, I don't really have the resources to change author a lot. But it could be one of the ways of getting some traction is, but okay, so I really do think that 2D is great because it's less likely to be messy than 3D. Just look at our offices, right? So I really appreciate what Apple's doing, as I said earlier. However, multiple 2Ds are crucial. So when it comes to Safari, can there be a plugin for Safari that, if delivered specific content, it can open several windows? Because one of our dreams in this community, of course, is you have a central workspace, but you have lots of screens around the room with various things that relate to what you do. In what environment can that be made?
Safari. So you can have multiple windows up. And you can open multiple windows. And if they're on, for example, the same domain, then they have the ability to communicate with them in real time using broadcast channel. If you have other peer coordination techniques, then any web page that you have has the ability to coordinate with any other web page or any other user on any other web page that you deign to connect in that way. So I've been using things like AutoPeer to experiment with that sort of thing with myself, with other users, and across devices as well. So you can connect a phone to a Mac or a Mac to a Vision Pro, or people are around the world. And so, yeah.
Can you assign walls or environments in your physical environment for specific things? So when you open up your selection of web pages, something always goes on the wall on the left and so on?
If that's not something that was covered in the keynote, then it's not something I can comment on.
Okay, but it would be, you talk about physical-based rendering. So I guess what I'm talking about is physical-based location of Safari windows. Am I at least using the right language, whether you're working on it or not? Or would such
I'm not
thought about differently?
I'm not familiar with details of that kind.
Okay. Because so far, in terms of us selling this future to friends and so on, sitting here with a 27-inch screen that I tell you about every time I see you, it's actually really close to a lot of the benefits of VR. In terms of text and flat stuff, not 3D modeling, obviously. If I can't put something with reason easily around the room, it's like we're losing the entire environment. So is there
the location scheme, the location sort of system of moving things around is really natural. I think
can it store?
And Nathan get it.
But there's the related question before I hand over to Peter again. Can it store from session to session where the windows are?
I'm not familiar with any details about that.
Okay, because the second part of that is if you work at home, a coffee shop, and an office, those relative locations may have different, you may not want to put it over the fireplace if there's no fireplace in the office, so to speak. So that's why 2D great, but having more control, pretty crucial. Okay, that was a useful back and forth. Thank you, Brandel. Peter.
Oh, I also noticed a pointer on the web to one company, I'm blanking on its name, that was working on auto stereoscopic displays on 2D laptop screens. And it occurs to me that it'd be really, really nice. And this is just basically inbound feedback to Apple, Brendel. So if you maybe pass it along to whoever, if anyone there is working on it, if there was a MacBook Air that had a Fresnel lens or something in front of the screen that would allow the spatial interface API to be used with respect to the regular Apple laptop for people who, for some reason or other, can't be wearing a Vision Pro headset, so that you could still have
Fresnel or lenticular?
Yeah, lenticular lens, exactly. So that someone who's just
the front of the Vision Pro is a lenticular screen.
Yeah, so
the front
it'd
of
be really nice if that technology could be applied in a laptop format for people who aren't wearing a headset, but still be able to get limited 3D with respect to, just basically the volume of the screen going back a few inches, forward a few inches for a natural stereoscopic effect. So people with glasses wouldn't have to worry about inserts or, just some situations where you can't afford to be using a full-blown headset. And then I think you'd see a lot more developer uptake of the 3D APIs, because I knew they would also be usable across the product line and not only within Vision OS. So just sort of an inbound suggestion, because I know there's definitely is one company out there that's already doing that on a modified laptop screen. And I'm blanking on the company. If I find it, I'll send the link in to Fro to distribute to the group.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't be too hard to find. So, so yeah, like I said, the front of the screen, the way that the eyesight is being achieved is with a lenticularly modulated display. And what Mike Rockwell said in the Daring Fireball podcast show, whatever that thing is called, is that it only renders the view for the people it identifies in the room and renders them in the way and for the benefit of them in their vantage point, which means that if there's one person in the room, it'll only render one appropriate to their view, and then if it sees another person, it'll render another one. So not only is it a lenticular display, but it's opportunistically limiting the sort of fidelity and quantity of its render for the benefit of the viewers involved.
That's amazing.
And, you know,
Brilliant.
so, yeah, no, it's incredible. And so, in terms of the pieces you're describing, I think that's proof positive that they exist within the organization. What I will say about sort of what we used to call this in the 90s and the 2000s, they called it fish tank VR, which is when you have this sort of small region of space that you're looking at. One of the things that you do realize once you have stereo parallax head tracked VR like this, or even just head tracked VR like this, is that a laptop screen is really small, and the sort of appropriate angle of view that you have for being able to observe it is incredibly specific. And so while there are benefits from being able to see space, see separated space in that view, the benefits of having a spatial computing of the kind that Vision Pro and other technologies sort of afford is that you have just so much more flexibility of where your body is and how you're orienting yourself in relation to the stuff that isn't going to come from being at a laptop. You know, my goal with this is that I've always hated computers or sitting at computers and existing in such a fixed relationship to all of this technology. You know, it's been the bane of my spine, if nothing else. And so there will be benefits, and you know, it may be the case that these are technologies that are beneficial down the line. But my experience has been that the entire premise of virtual reality is to be able to stretch out and be able to use spaces a little better. And so I think lenticular displays are a part of that, but I feel like they would need to be sort of 80-inch TV size things and have, you know, the kind that you know, Project Starline at Google is making use of and things like that.
Yeah, I see your hand, Fabian, but I just want to know, Peter, why do you want this?
Well, I'm assuming that if it was embedded in a laptop, it would be a more accessible price point to get a larger number of people to be able to use the technology. Also, I was reading a couple of blog posts that were saying that if the power cord gets jostled, you're instantly plunged into darkness. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but if it is, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with a regular laptop where I didn't have to worry about the power cable suddenly blacking me out temporarily until I was able to get it reseated.
Does it have a short-term battery, Brandel? Or does the actually, it's not jostled, it's a click in. It's
That's right.
just going to fall off like a USB-C. So, because it's Peter, it's, you know, we talked initially with you about the Quest 2. You want to wait for the Apple, and I know you're concerned about motion sickness, but there is no motion sickness in the Vision Pro because you move only in the environment that is real, unless you specifically choose to be in an artificial VR environment, and that is far from the default. I think that's one of the genius things Apple has done. Do you agree with me, Brandel?
Yeah, it's fascinating being more or less in your own space and as a visual resolution where you can just use your laptop screen without the pass through, but without the sort of the virtual Mac stuff, but it's better with it. So yeah, it's really interesting to have all of that sort of real space and the field of view that you have with it as well. Yeah.
Oh, and what happens to people who have bifocals? That's another big concern for me, because without the bifocals, I'd be dead meat. You know, would you need just like a full distance prescription or a full close-up prescription, or what happens in a
So
case like those headsets? I've never seen anything actually anywhere written addressing the problem of people with bifocals and using any kind of prescription optic in a head-mounted display.
Peter, I have trifocals, but I'd let Brandel answer it. In the Quest 2, it is not a problem.
Mhm. So the, lensing is, a solution for assisting with accommodation distance. So if you have a single focal distance that you're requiring, that's because you have difficulty accommodating there. Bifocals tend to be for the benefit of being able to work in close work. All head-mounted displays to date are working with a fixed focus distance, which tends to be out at about a meter. And so if you have your prescription appropriate for that, then it's going to be correct. It's going to be able to kind of work for you. One of the challenges with all head-mounted displays to date is that results in something called the avergence is the VAC, Vergence Accommodation Conflict, which is that in meat space in real life, when you look at something close and you move it far away, you're changing your vergence, the way that your eyes converge on that specific object, but you're also changing the focus point of your eye. And people who lose one eye often become much more attuned to their monoscopic accommodation distance as a cue for where the depth is, but the depth is nevertheless impaired. People who haven't had any time in VR before at all find that it's a little bit uncanny, but it's a relatively fast thing for people to get over. But in practice, it means that it makes things that are too close uncomfortable for anybody for any reason to look at, and so you simply don't put content there in VR. So you don't have things at this distance in VR yet, and nobody really can. But everything that's sort of out in a wider sort of arm's length or further works really well with that single fixed focal plane of where you need to be at.
Fabian.
Yeah, I cannot imagine, like literally, I'm really trying to see how it could be cheaper than a $300 headset that fits in your backpack and that gives you a display that size, like in terms of volume, like you can literally walk inside it, either use controllers or your hand to move things around. So it's not just looking at it, it's a conversation we already had, and I think seeing it as solely a big display, and people mentioned it before with the the fish tank, is just wrong. That's not what it is. But even if it were, which it's not, in terms of price point, I cannot imagine how it could be more affordable than this. Even though, let's say, if you take the Quest 2 with all the baggage it comes from, let's say, Meta. For the anecdote, I was in Paris on Tuesday, and I visited Lynx, which is a French company who does also an XR headset. I will not show the video because it's like the worst recording possible, but I run my page on it because it has a browser, namely Volvic, which does WebXR support. So this one is not subsidized by anything. It's just a tiny startup, like it's literally 2 floors, I guess 20 people, I forgot. It's a very small team, and they build the headset. It works because I worked a couple of times. I still don't have it at home. A little bit frustrated, but that's okay, no rush. I have enough headsets around, but the point is you have no, no privacy concern. Like the whole raison d'être, the reason they exist in the first place is to provide a viable alternative to subsidize, let's say, privacy securing kind of mechanisms to make cheaper devices. So that's about $1,000 more or less. They also have the different lenses and all. Yeah, thanks for the link in the chat. It's so I understand. I also don't want the headset. I don't want the headset. I want everything without any hardware. But in terms of like non-magical thinking, I think the headset is like such a sweet spot in terms of how compact, light, like the if you take all the constraint versus what it offers, like in terms of agency, volume, and interaction, I really have a hard and also lack of risk. Like it's not as if you're plugging something inside the skull or anything like this. Like I don't like the headset. I put it in the trash or I step on it. Boom. That's it says. I don't recommend doing it, but it's as simple as this. So I have a hard time imagining, and I'm arguing a little bit there because I discussed a lot with people who don't want the headset. And again, I don't want the headset, but in terms of achieving what it does without, I haven't seen anything close to it. I've seen a lot of different displays, hardware-wise. Maybe it will, I hope it will happen again. I hope so. But will it be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago? And it's definitely not going to be cheaper. This, I'm like 99.9% sure for the equivalent capabilities. Yeah, Frode?
I want to make it illegal to discuss whether to have a headset or not, because I think it's a real waste of time. And the reason I think it's a waste of time, all the questions and issues are valid. There's no question about that. I mean, look, we're going in different directions. I can survive a whole day on my watch. You know, I don't want to sit in front of this display all day either. There's absolutely no way in hell I would have a full day in a headset, even if the headset was light. But I have several friends who are complaining about it, and they're all wearing glasses, and they're all happy to have a baseball cap. So I can understand the reluctance and having, you know, put the Quest on my head and taking it off. Yes, absolutely. But it is really a matter of different environments for different use cases for different parts of the work you do. And this is, of course, why, to me, the whole metadata and data portability is so important. You know, you should be able to be in the Vision or the Quest when you want to, be somewhere else when you don't want to, and it shouldn't take 15 minutes to set it up like it currently does on the Quest. So, you know, trying to get 3D, Peter, you are so brilliant and you have so many contributions, but your reticence, like talking about different displays and all of these things, it literally is just pulling another centimeter of what this can do out of a current display. You know, going in and being able to look at, you know, Fabien's like we did last week or week before, I can't remember, but sitting here and it's everywhere, but not in a mess. It is so different than seeing it through even a 27-inch viewport. So I think we should do, you know, look at things and different things, but Fabien, just make me stop talking.
Right, with great pleasure. Not just to do that. So I think, yeah, we will. I'll just literally change the topic. I'll show you my screen. Please let me know if you can see it. Can you see the mirroring from the headset?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So it's the usual interface. Last time I dropped, let's say, the URL into the code editor, and this loaded that. Could be reformatted, could have the syntax lighting, all this. What is new this time? So I can move that 3D model around, this little water bottle. And what I did is hide the code like this. But inside the bottle, I don't know if I cannot show it. And if I pinch, the bottle just jump, let's say 10 centimeters, because it has the code inside it, which is this one on top, inside the bottle, let's say. Because we had a couple of discussions where, let's say, seeing the code as code was not always necessary. And let's say if you do it for, let's say, teaching kids or something like this, maybe you want to have the code when you edit it, but not when you use it. So that's the little change I did this morning.
Cool.
And it's, where are you guys? You here? And it's literally like 3 words. So that was very short. So I'm happy about it because it means the architecture was, correct, let's say.
This is super, super cool. And I have to ask you your perspective on, you know, I'm all about keyboard shortcuts, blah, blah, blah. So what I saw there, I'm wondering about keyboard shortcuts. I've been thinking a little bit equivalent, just different gestures. Of course, they will have different meanings. I see that's awesome. But also, this little bottle you had, are you also thinking of an environment where you have different tools arranged? So let's say if you want to make a citation, you do that, and then something happens because having, when you look at a craftsperson, they have different tools for different things. It
So
would be beautiful to use that model.
I don't know if you remember, but if I show my wrist, there is a pink cube on
The
the wrist.
cube, yes.
And so that's the idea that you take a piece of code and you drag it on the cube. It's then become a shortcut to that code. It's the same principle, except that let's say that 3D model is attached to your wrist. But here you could have that bottle execute something for other, let's say, entities, and then you put it spatially. Let's say it would be clone the next selected entity, whatever you want. Edit the text, reformat the text, whatever, and then you place them wherever you want, like a physical toolbox, as you were saying, and then you can still execute them. So yes, basically.
There is a Quest VR game, a shooter. I can't remember what it's called. And the one thing that's really cool there is things a soldier would have on its body, you have to have there. So your iPad type thing is on your back. You have to grab it. Your ammunition is here, all of that. So to start using ourselves, because that cube is amazing. I could think also, obviously, an armband. You can actually flick it around. You have different kinds of pieces of information. You could literally have something up your sleeve, right? As a magician.
So the cube also is special in it. So I am at the moment I'm playing like Half-Life Alyx, the game from Valve. I just cannot recommend it more because a lot of time now people just stick to standalone VR, which is super convenient, okay, but then the kind of experience you have with PC VR, and even if you're not a gamer, it doesn't really matter. I mean, when you have zombie running at your face, maybe you'll rethink that, but I really recommend trying it in terms of at least, let's say, learning the user experience and the mechanism you just mentioned, because in it, when you get ammo, you indeed drop it on your back, like behind your shoulder. And the first time, it's not even awkward the first time, actually. The first time is like, whoa, I can do this. And then you just cannot forget, like you keep it in the same, you pull stuff out of your backpack like this. It's really well done. So we can definitely do this. The wrist, though, is a little bit special because you have haptic feedback. Like you know first where your wrist is at all time. You cannot forget where your wrist is. And also when you touch your wrist, you feel it. So it's a little bit like...
you get the haptics from it.
Yeah, yes.
Of course. That's...
It really makes a difference because if you touch in the air, honestly, sometimes it's like you did, basically.
I have to say on the record, that is certifiably genius. Having that here, so you get that physical tap. That's really brilliant.
But I don't think I can attribute to myself. I'm pretty sure I must have seen that somewhere at some point. But
it may have been a side effect of just the fact that it's here. Your hand goes through and you notice it. So here's the question then for Brandel as well. So here's Fabian talking about these amazing interactions, some of which we've talked about earlier in the year. Could potentially some of this be part of a Safari plugin? Because even though I spent yesterday with Bob Stein, the father of CD-ROM books, I really don't like the idea of information ghettos. I know you all don't like them either. So I'm wondering if I can be in a Fabian environment, do this, put something, clipboard, whatever it might be, and then I go to another website. And if permissions are okay, because of the plugin, I still have my things.
I have not written a browser extension before for Safari. I wrote them many years ago in Firefox 2.4 days. In that context, it was possible to retain information. The scope of the information was only that which was exposed to the browser, rather than to, say, an equivalent native operating system application. So that kind of thing would probably depend on the level of access that's supported to Safari in general.
So I never wrote a plugin for Safari ever, but I did write also a couple for Firefox. I think never Chrome, but usually now with web extension, it's rather compatible if you don't do some weird.
Yeah. Web extensions. So I believe Safari must be fully compatible with web extensions. And so, and I did write a Chrome one very haphazardly and quickly, but it seemed to be a relatively painless experience to do so.
You know,
Yeah.
I had a,
You can retain information between, because for example, one of the plugin I did like way back when was on any website I visited, it would check in my wiki if I cited or if I visited that specific page, and then link back, like a kind of backlink for the entire web. And that worked pretty well. So I imagine doing something like this, being able to like bring content wherever. Usually it's more permissive than the normal way. So I would assume so.
I did have this thing called Hyperwords. I'm just putting some links in here, which was several things. It was a browser plugin, but it was also a server plugin. Because I'm thinking to have an ecosystem of tools like that you can take with you. If this, let's say there's a WordPress plugin for this, that means that this tool set, whatever WordPress server you go to, you could potentially use it. So you have the same cool interactions. You know, in the physical world, we have fancy pens and fancy pencils and things like that, and you can take it from one room to another. Crazy. It should be possible to do that with this as well. And also, one thing that Peter keeps banging on about, thank you, the whole library idea. What if you could take your library with you? What if your library is a fan? You know, you flick it, click your wrist, and then a huge kind of a library thing starts happening. You shouldn't have to go to one environment, do stuff, retrieve stuff, go to another environment, insert the stuff. We need to get it more seamlessly connected, right? I'll get an animated thumbs up here. Cool. Oh, it's very exciting. And Brandel, thank you for giving us a bit of realities around all of this.
One quick thing to potentially link back also with Peter's point, because I want to be critical, let's say, of this viewpoint, because I just don't see it literally how it could be feasible, despite my wanting to to not have hardware. So I will just briefly share my screen on the literal window, and I imagine some of you maybe even have done it before or know of a project of the sort. Can you see my little sketch?
Yes, cool.
So yeah, I'm sharing the remarkable. I sketched it just yesterday, I guess, or this morning even. The idea is I bought yet another gadget, a portable video projector. And what I want to do is having the VR headset, having, I call it a slice exporter, where you basically have one flat surface, like let's say a whiteboard, or with something funnier than a whiteboard. For example, if you bring the bottle, the water bottle I showed just earlier, it would show a slice of it, for example, the outline or part of it or the shadow of it. I don't know yet. And then on what you would see on the video projector is not the viewpoint of the person in the VR headset, not mirroring, because that would make everybody sick. You could have it to show it, to explain VR to people, the kind of interactive window. And I put here a little lip motion so that people looking at the projection could interact back with the virtual world. The goal being to indeed to try to remain inclusive, to say if people don't have a headset, they can still interact, they should be able to interact, should have some nice experience. But that's why I say the slice exporter, they're going to have not a volume, but a literal slice of that volume, just something flattened. And I'm wondering, well, if people have experienced that before, if yes, how it was, and if not, do you think it would make sense, and what kind of usages beside pedagogy, let's say, that could be useful?
Very cool. Thank you. Leon, please.
Two things, one for Fabien and one for Frode. Fabien, I haven't seen something like that. I did see some social VR companies allowing to basically put a big screen in a physical room, which was sort of a mirror to that social event. So it would more be a read-only experience, so you could see what was going on. So yeah, that's the only thing I've seen which comes a bit close into your direction. But I guess you want to go beyond that.
Yeah, because I've literally done that also. Like 2 or 3 years ago or more, I used like a huge 82 inches touch screen, and I could see myself, and people could see me or wave. So that works and it's nice, but I think that doesn't like properly both illustrate and leverage the frustration of when you wave at me through that window, you're not in my world. Like you're through this infinitely thin slice of nothingness, and you cannot like touch inside. So I want to play on in that frustration to say, no, you think you get VR, you think you see a 2D screen and you see 3D content inside it, but it's just not the same thing. But still not be, let's say, purely critical, but see what kind of interaction when you put things in that thin slice when you're in VR, for example, can you use to make it still interesting? So yeah, the kind of window to the world I've seen and done, but I don't think it really, I don't think it properly gets the idea.
Yeah, that makes sense to really show that it's more than a screen. Yeah, I like the idea. Oh yeah, and another thing I wanted to say, Frode, you triggered me when you were talking about information ghettos. And actually, this week I got very frustrated because I already for many years I just want to mount a network drive on my smartphone. Basically, I just want to access my network files, and the sad news is that all the time I end up with either having to load some kind of Dropbox cloud service app, or I have to download some kind of third-party app which uses a Fuse. It's some kind of file system abstraction layer to basically access a network drive. But in both cases, I still need to sort of cherry pick the files which I then have to save locally to my smartphone, and it's obviously it's better to fully surrender to a OneDrive integrated device or Apple solution. But yeah, aren't you afraid? That's my question. That the answer to your information ghetto will be these cloud services like Dropbox, iCloud, G Drive.
I hear your concern, absolutely. I think of this in different levels, and of course, one of them is I feel that a manuscript, meaning something that is being worked on, is a very different thing from a published document. And for published documents, it has to be accessible, interactive, and long-lasting are my criteria, chiefly. That's why I'm all about the whole visual meta thing. Of course, you shouldn't have a PDF while you're writing. That would be a literal insanity. When it comes to the networks as well, there are so many security issues and so on. I do like the internet, I do like the web, but I do think that a lot of the things we should be able to do locally, we should be able to do locally. If you link to a file you already have and you give that to someone else and they happen to have that same original file, there's absolutely no reason to go through the web to get it. So the whole idea you're talking about of putting your own drive on your own network / on your phone makes complete sense. You know, it's just a shame that reality isn't allowing it to happen now. But in principle, I think we fully agree on that. It's a bizarre thing, but you know, Apple and Google, and Microsoft, they have to deal with security issues that you know we don't have to. So maybe it's partly commercial and partly that.
Yeah, it would be great, just like the Vision Pro basically allows you to limit the immersive mode, sort of. Sometimes I wish that I could basically tell Android or iOS, like, hey, I require this amount of security right now because I know this is my network drive and this is good stuff. You don't have to worry about it. So this kind of like, I feel like I will always get the hardcore security model, while as a user, I don't really need the hardcore security model, I guess. But yeah, I'm just a consumer which needs to protect it in the end because, yeah, reputation. So I also get it. But yeah, last thing, I do want this thing you were talking about, this on your hand, this sort of umbrella. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think what you're talking about now is also a call for basic HTML. Forget all the fancy stuff in there. But if you're moving HTML files around that doesn't have JavaScript or CSS or whatever, they're really basic things, but they have a lot of useful things. So they should require basically no security, well, relatively speaking. But to be able to send each other documents can be tricky. Anyway, a hugely interesting issue. Thank you. And Fabienne, please. We were ready so quick, you weren't ready.
Sorry, I was still mute. Yes, indeed. No, I mentioned it briefly a couple of weeks ago, but I went on a holiday and I took not all, but a bunch of gadgets, but I still remained offline. And it's the kind of thing I worked on, namely how can my devices see each other offline, still on the same network, because I took a little Raspberry Pi as a hotspot, and that I can efficiently manage content. That was also the theme of my exploration during the demo day. Meaning, can I literally see the files across different file systems? There are definitely ways, I think it remains an interesting problem, especially if you want it across, let's say, heterogeneous devices. Like servers, NAS, mobile phones, different operating systems, etc., etc. And I think it's an important thing because we talk about workspace, or we think of our offices, our toolbox, and all. It should work everywhere. It should be grubbable. Should be so. That's something I explored, and I can send some link in the chat. It's very, as per usual, exploratory, meaning it worked once on my configuration. Doesn't necessarily work twice, even on my own configuration. One thing, though, in terms of warning for security is, for the anecdote, I get the mindset of like, I just want things to work, plus it's my network, it's secure. So for the anecdote, I had deployed my service there. So it's basically a Node.js script that I can install on any machine, and then it expose some port, and then I can access some files, run some code remotely, etc. It's a bit of, I think it's a happy mess. It's starting to get there to coalesce into something useful, in my opinion. And in any way, it helps me to think. All this to say that at some point, I looked in the log file, because there was some strange request. And then I was like, what do you mean strange request? Like, I'm in my own network. I can't have strange requests. It's my Wi-Fi. And then basically, I left my desktop is in the DMZ. It's basically exposed to the internet. And then on the internet, people scan nonstop for open ports and then put queries in order to basically hack your machine. And I completely forgot that this computer running my script was on the DMZ, so was accessible from the outside world. And I felt, oh, man, I'm on my network, I'm safe. So I just a word of caution, a little. Nothing happened as far as I know. Yeah, you're safe until you realize you're not, because you already did some stuff in the past, you forgot. It's not trivial. As long as you have backup, I think, in my opinion, at least in terms of personal, let's say, data, that's the main advice I would give. Because if somebody steals your stuff and it's your picture of holiday or family stuff, it's more losing them that's a problem than them leaking to the whole universe. But I would still be cautious in terms of, I want the no security solution because I'm safe in my home. It's like, are you?
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the specifics of the Stuxnet worm, it's a stunning sort of example. And I mean, it's an extreme case. It was for damaging the Syrian nuclear program, but it was also 9 years ago. And that means that with an existence proof of that kind, so Stuxnet was, it turns out, built to be able to infiltrate a particular network configuration of specific sets of centrifuges and air conditioning units and all of these things that some intelligence agency had become aware of existing in a specific configuration. And the Stuxnet worm was so good at spreading itself around that it managed to make it onto the ISS. Somebody got it on a USB stick up there, and it did nothing everywhere else except this specific configuration of devices. But when it did see these devices, then it started acting on the centrifuge to sort of delay and modulate its use in a way that would increase the wear and tear and ultimately sort of disable and damage the centrifuge in a way that was and apparently I think did successfully impair the Syrian nuclear weapons program, because it broke their centrifuge that is necessary for the reaction. And so that was one state actor against another, but it was also 9 years ago, and a lot of people with a lot less imagination had a much clearer sense of the basic anatomy of being able to kind of pick apart somebody's network and decide if this is here and that's there, then we'll do this and that. So yeah, the internet is an intensely unsafe place, and that applies as much to the web as it does to native apps, frankly. And so any channel of information, any channel by which people can get information about a user or set of users on a specific network is very likely to be used for malicious purposes and done so with a plummeting kind of engineering cost in the future.
Let's say that, let's have a bit of a fantasy moment, that we suddenly all work together and we have money and time and all of these good things. What do you all, I'm going to ask you, Brandel, lost. What do you all think we should build for the Vision Pro? It should be accessible on other headsets too, but let's use that since that's the best spec thing at the moment. In order to ourselves want to do real work in there, and in order to put it on friends and colleagues who think it is it's not a realistic thing, because I think it is very, very important for all of us to sell the Vision Pro. Obviously, Apple will make their money and they'll sell it well, but to sell it as a knowledge work tool. And the reason I think that is so important is because otherwise in the culture, it will become thought of as an entertainment or a sport or a meditation or any of those things where you can put in a laptop. I think it is incumbent upon us outsiders to say, no. The direction people should think about is you put this on your head. Clearly that person sitting over there in the coffee shop with a Vision Pro is doing real work. Maybe other things, but it's not an assumption that they're doing entertainment. So who would like to go first? What should we build? We have $2 billion to spend in a year. You know, like a tenth of Meta's.
So I'm going to, you're going to regret, but I took the mic. So I'm not going to worry for Apple in terms of its communication. I think both are going to be okay. Plus, it is already a goodwill and communication machine going at full speed. So yeah, I'm not worried in this, and I also they don't promote it as neither a gadget nor how do you say a game or player thing. So I'm actually not worried at all. I'm not in rush. I'm eager to go to one of the workshop. I'm not going to go all the way to learn Swift, but I'll see whatever is possible in order not to, but still, let's say, prepare for it. But I think there is no rush in terms of building something right now with time and 2 million or whatever amount. It's basically continuing what I've been playing with and exploring, meaning my notes, the wiki, whatever format it might be, like the link I just posted about the offline Octopus, offline first, how to integrate with other devices, making sure I'm personally not locked in an ecosystem. And also that's why I mentioned the links before, is because that's also one of the beauty of WebXR is whatever the next headset might be. If it's amazing, I'll jump ship. If it's not amazing, that's okay. I'm going to at least run it once and try it. But that means most of the work should be at least in part done. It's like a safety mechanism, being one abstraction level. Just the right abstraction level. In terms of actually what to build, because it would be still interesting to see what the new affordances will be. Let's say eye tracking with pinch and this. I would take a bit of time to think among knowledge work. What are the kind of efficient interactions or repeated needs, let's say highlighting in the documents, or I have no idea, just saying whatever comes to mind, would best leverage this new interaction, both eye tracking and then the hand validation, and then explore this specifically because that's the one novelty, let's say, of the device.
I'm not going to let you go quite yet because you didn't answer the question. It was very useful what you said, and it really helps frame the levels of abstraction, lock-in, all these things. But as I put here in the chat for the transcript, you put the headset on a person and they work in the thing we're talking about. And after a few minutes, they say, wow, how could people be working in tiny rectangles before? How is that possible? Very much like now, if we were supposed to work on only pen and paper, it's really difficult to kind of conceive of, right? No, 2 billion. I don't know. Budget doesn't matter. Let's pretend that the affordances, the libraries are there for us to make magic if we need to, Leon. But okay, Fabian, we'll come back to you if you want to. Peter, you're next on my screen.
Okay, what I'd really want would be a speech-driven Benedictine cyberspace. And we haven't seen that anywhere yet, but the idea would be to direct the system to show me all my software modules by size, date, and complexity measure. And it would then plot all of those data elements. Basically, it would create a three-dimensional space automatically for me and plot those elements. So each dot would represent a different component in the software that I'm working on, or it could be books. Give me books by subject, author, and year. And it could then provide a visualization of a high-dimensional data set, selecting initially 3 dimensions. Then I could go in and grab one of them and say, unfold this to show sentiment values versus number of users who've written reviews versus academic field of the reviewer. And it could then create another 3-dimensional space. And if I wanted to, I could jump inside of that space to replace the original space with the new 3 dimensions and be able to tease through a high-dimensional data set. And I think that the scientific community, biomedical researchers, would be absolutely in love with that if it existed. I think it would be invaluable for programmers. I really think that the sweet spot is dealing with high dimensional data sets and providing a textual linguistic way of describing what visualization you need, because trying to select that out of menus would be a real pain in the neck. And it's much more straightforward to do that using language. So I think using language and then drive the visualization based upon the language to slowly explore your data set. And I'd want to be able to save some of those visualizations and give them a name so that I could just say, give me the subject overview, and subject overview would be defined as a subset of 3 dimensions, maybe some information on how I want the things colored, so that I could basically have a macro describing how I want the 3 dimensions to be utilized and be able to trigger that using speech and language. And then I'd say, wow, how did I ever live without that?
I have a question about your Benedictine cyberspace. I do have the book and I have looked at it, but do you see that as being kind of a sculpture or an environment primarily?
You could either choose to be immersed in it, which means you'd be moving within the space. And in that mode of operation, where you are would determine what data was displayed around you. So you basically are moving a probe that's defining what a query is off of 3 dimensions in one space, and then you could have the data in a secondary display being controlled by the probe. So in this case, the probe is describing the query. In the other mode of operation, you define ahead of time fixed axes and what they are off of an existing pool of data, and then each point is an actual datum that corresponds to those 3 dimensions. So again, in the one mode, moving in the space is actually defining the query. So you're simultaneously querying 3 dimensions by moving your probe around within the environment. And the other way, it's more like a conventional looking at a graph plotting a bunch of points. And you could basically be like a fly spec avatar. And if, say it's the multi-user scenario, then I'd want to have a simplified avatar representing you, a simplified avatar representing me, just so that I know where you are in the space and what you're looking at.
All right, thank you. I'm sure
You know,
there'll
'cause
be
then-
lots of that later.
Because then I'd be able to say, Frode, turn around, there's a cluster behind you. And then you could turn around in the space if you're fully immersed in it, and then see the data constellation I'm looking at the time. And and the way that I do that, and I actually sort of experimented with that once way back when I was a second-year law student in Syracuse. We had a virtual reality lab in the Heroy Geology building, which at the time was the building just adjacent to the law school building. And they had some Silicon Graphics workstations in the basement, and we were playing with the code there. And I built a bunch of little 3D widgets to represent in my absolute position within the 3D space, another one to represent my orientation within the 3D space, and a third widget to represent the vector that I was currently moving at. And just having those little 3 dashboard widgets proved to be extremely helpful.
Thank you, Peter. For the benefit of everyone, I'm uploading the book now in the chat, an OK scan version of it. Leon, please.
Thank you, Peter. That's a really cool idea. I want to steal an idea from you, which you mentioned some calls ago. You were talking about a link shortener, which is sort of gives you an easy to pronounce word like purple rain 26 or something, and that converts to a link. Like, how about if knowledge sharing is the goal here, we forget about a multi-party experience. We just care about the knowledge sharing. So that already saves us $1 million here. So $1 million left. And what we can do then is come up with a sort of app which is also a website, and it just has one text field, just like Google or Wayback Machine. And whenever you're stumbling across an interesting article online, you copy paste the URL into that text field. Then you get this shortened, this short link, the Purple Rain 26. You put on your headset, you launch the app with exactly the same name as the website, and you say Purple Rain 20 something, and then you basically you can basically see all the sort of visual meta around that website or article, which is basically coming from a server we built, which is sort of maybe a snapshot of archive.org, and on top of that, maybe some user contributed visual meta who also visited that page. Maybe we can brush off Fabien's browser plugin from the shelf, and we can basically let people, create visual meta across, when they're surfing in the website. Just an idea.
I'm just locating him. Maybe we should get in touch. He seems to be active. Okay, so obviously the kind of stuff in this book, Michael Benedict's book, clearly relate to what we're talking about, going in all kinds of dimensions. So I look forward to being able to build these things and see what actually works and what doesn't. But then a question for you, Brandel. With this community, what would you like to, let's say you're at a conference, and I know I'm saying things that are obvious, but I still feel the need to say it. I'm sorry. You're at a conference, people wonder, what do? You explain what you do, and they say, oh, la, 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 and you say, no, plops. They're in a work environment. In addition to whatever Apple is doing now, what would you want to be able to be proud to say that your friends in this community has put together for reading, writing, thinking, whatever, but some kind of a work thing? What might that be?
I think something for navigating information, and that allows people to see the way in which space has a meaningful impact on the sort of organization of things. So, like what I did with Timeline VR, I think is a good start. I think people could take that kind of thing a lot further. In particular, because Wikipedia is an open kind of platform that is one can kind of sample from arbitrarily. But it's sort of a use case like that is a really great reference point for saying, like, here's what happens when you have the ability to see this thing, but also have proximity to that thing. And to have that as a technological sort of representation of the needs and priorities that kind of information processing has would be helpful for driving, harder-headed sort of engineers than myself into solving those problems. One of the things that's been fascinating about this, and what will continue to happen, is so a good number of people inside Apple were disclosed. That's the term we use on this project. But a far greater majority of them were not. And one of the things that was most exciting about Monday Before Last is not just that the world got to see, obviously that's important, but that all of the other very, very clever folks inside Apple also got to see what it was, but to get a bit of a taste of what the sort of the chief problems that computing in that domain exhibits, in order for them to be able to bring their special expertise. And so what I want out of the community is stuff that gets far enough to show the people who have the best sort of positioning on those problems to really understand what they might need to solve them. So, does that make sense?
No, it's
No?
nice, but I'm kind of pushing for something more specific. You said navigate information, which is nice, and talk about Wikipedia. But do you have any more specific thoughts? Because there are some things that'll happen, like the whole globe thing we've talked about. Finally, I've seen some of the things happening for this. That clearly will have some immediate benefits, but something more specific.
Yeah. Okay, so by navigate and so have like being on one piece of information versus having proximity to another. Like one of the sort of the shortfalls of today's display devices is that you have one thing that you have in really high detail in front of you at a time. But the sort of the original focus plus context papers that were presented in the 1980s, showing that reading a document is kind of like holding a very small one newspaper column would whole over a newspaper and kind of browsing it like that. When in practice, because of the very large size of a newspaper, RIP, and the sort of the relationship we have to all of those other pieces, we have a much more sort of multi-view perspective over the entire document. So having a proof positive that an entire thing can be consumed in a way that allows somebody to have sort of at a remove a total view of all of the things in that corpus. So, you know, like a newspaper is good, a big broadsheet. Even a magazine like The Economist is still much less good in that regard, in the sense that you have a better view of fewer things. Having something that gives you a good view of a lot of things and a great view of one thing, so that you can kind of literally navigate, like actually move between those sort of things without losing that context, without losing the broader sense in which all of these things coexist, would be really great. And for that to be done on an informational basis rather than sort of a geospatial one would be really great. So, you know, globes are cool, transitions between different spaces, being able to look at that. You know, I think that there's a lot of stuff that I'd love to talk to the folks at, you know, Zillow or Airbnb about. But I think that they'll be coming and knocking on my door anyway. What I want is people whose primary domain is information, text, reading and writing, voice and glyphs, all of those kinds of things, being able to kind of treat those with a flexibility and kind of a promiscuity, frankly, in terms of the multimodality of all of those things, that we have the ability to say, like, this is an information processing device of a kind that allows us to disregard the different distinctions between sources and locations and modes and things like that. Is that more to your liking, or do you want?
It helps. And while I'm listening to you, the link that Fabian put in, the Babia thing, is just appearing here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm mulling over and trying to piece that out, Brando. But Fabian, please.
Yeah, my just to riff on this, and just because I'll have to go also in a minute, but then I can imagine this as a James Burke, the historian of technology who did Connections, as an avatar, helping a kid going through simple Wikipedia or an equivalent of Wikipedia, but for kids, on a topic, let's say archaeology or something like this, where the kid would have a, let's say, 3x3 space where they can move around. I use the metaphor of the little water bottle with a pinch as an action, so that they would have, let's say, 5 or 10 different items on how to navigate that page, extract a portion of text or an image with it, and basically organize a shelf of different pieces of information from either that simple Wikipedia page or, let's say, the path of the different pages they would have visited. That's it.
Leon.
And I'm sorry, I'll have to go. So that was a wonderful discussion. And, yeah, I'll see you online.
Look forward.
All right, question. Oh, sorry. Can I? A question for Brandel. You said navigation, not losing context, and I guess the browser is a bit of an sort of also attempt to solve that with the back button, so you can go back to previous pages. Do you think there is a isn't it like, okay, this is maybe a crazy frame, but isn't not losing context, isn't the UI, the graphical user interface, and that we are doing so many things at this, we can do it at the same time. We're actually adding tabs. This was also not really designed into the World Wide Web or something, or imagined. Like, isn't this doesn't this mean, this navigating, does this mean that we're not talking about text anymore, like text information sharing?
It's still text.
Well, is it? If you have like a Quest Pro, a home environment, you have all kinds of you have text talking to you, but also certain things are placed in certain positions. And you know, if we're talking about knowledge sharing, then maybe we should be a bit more specific. Is it text, or is it text and images? Is it text and user interface, graphical? Because I think I see a bit of a issue there where Frode is asking Brandel to be more specific, but at the same time, it's not really clear if we're talking about text only, text and images, or text. If we're talking about spatially separating things, then the UI and the archetypes behind the UI also becomes quite important. So sorry, it's not really a question, but maybe you can do something with it.
It is a question, and from my side, sorry, I just had to look at the timeline VR. I got rainbow hands.
Yes, they are very colorful at the moment, right?
Very cool. Yeah, so the thing is, Leon, I've been working on this whole future of text thing for quite a while. And the reason is, well, I mean, my background is as an artist, Chelsea School of Art and all of that stuff, worked in advertising and so on. So I'm a photographer. That's one of my main passions, which is very odd. Quite a lot of people associated with Apple and text turned out to be photographers in the end. That's another thing, but absolutely nothing against it. It's just that the power of symbol manipulation is so strong, and I think it'll be so much more powerful when unleashed multidimensionally. The future of text is multidimensional, I would like to say. But so often it comes down to text doesn't have the nuance of speech. Everybody watches TikTok these days. You know, really, really boring discussions. I've written pages and pages kind of saying, nothing wrong with TikTok. I love TikTok. But if you're having a specific kind of discussion, you can't put little TikToks on a screen and have them make sense. You know, you can put sentences and make them non-linear, linear. So it's basically just crying out for text, because there is this phrase that's not used as much anymore, rich media, which, you know, images and video and 3D, which implies that text is poor media. I think that is really, really bad. So if we can integrate text with 3D and video and images and all that, we should absolutely do it. Absolutely nothing wrong with it at all. But I think it is really, really lazy to think that the more data heavy an experience is, the better it is for our work and our thinking. If so, then we just should go outside and sit in the forest, very multidimensional. This is where we were born, in the forest, so to speak, over a long period of time. So if we're talking about those moments where we're doing intellectual work, text will have a huge part to play, but it is also a very specific thing that is lacking. Let me just share the screen for a quick second here. So even though I have no money for development anymore, I asked my guys to do something, and here it is. So I think you guys have seen first this thing. Let's just do, all right. So you've probably seen this. I can't remember, so I'll do it real quick. There's a set of colors that will appear in a specific view based on these. There's no title because it's a bit arbitrary. People can edit it, make anything. So for instance, the yellow one, I think people should put their name in case their name appears in a document, for instance. It's hard to read, but easy to find. So if I do a keyboard shortcut, I get this. So these are the headings in gray, and these are the colors. The idea is you should get a feel for what's where in the document. It's messy. It doesn't actually work that well. So this is what I've asked the guys to do today. It is the exact opposite. So here are all of the red text, and below that will be any headings that happen to have that. So it's the reverse. So under PDF, Adobe, John Warnock, XMP, which is important in my world, these are the sections that talk about it. And the reason I'm bringing it up in response to the text question is color is a dimension, unless people have certain color blindness, and I know a lot of people have. Color can contribute quite literally another dimension of glanceability, because text is not glanceable natively at all. So if we get to a point where we still use text for some intersection between linear and non-linear thinking and communication, but if it is purely graphical, like on text messages, you do a smiley or a thumbs up or whatever it is, absolutely brilliant. You know, we should really, really push it, no question about that. But if we lose text, and to me, text is something that has symbolic value, but also grammar, right? A rebus doesn't have grammar in the same way. You know, it can be cute to have a poop emoji or whatever, but it doesn't extend in the same way. So that is really why I'm championing text and augmenting text, without in any way excluding other things. Now, on the tail end of this, I just want to say what I would like to have in VR for work. Editing a large document for me is very difficult. I think I'm not dyslexic, I can read, but there is a circuit in my brain, I've only realized it today, to read my own text. It's like it doesn't want to do it. For me to even review an email, unless it's super important, I can't read my own email that I just wrote. It has to go out and gone, right? So what I would really, really like in the Vision Pro and equivalent is more space for editing. You know, the idea of quite simply putting a ton of pages up on a wall, like in the olden days with a magazine, yes, I think that would really, really help people like me. And that a lot of that comes down to what is allowed, what APIs, what web services, and so on. I really don't want to just have one beautifully large screen in VR, because I've got this one already. Did that long speech give you a sense of what we mean by text in the community?
Yeah, I do have that. I do understand. I think it also circles back into what Brandel said. Like, probably the person coming up with a great idea should also come from that domain and work on it, or be familiar with the topic and the works around it on a daily basis. So I think probably such an idea maybe will come from you, actually, and not from me, because I think I'm more like, for example, I use memes, you know, which is a photo with a bit of text. And so for me, the information sharing, yeah, maybe I'm more a visual person who doesn't really, yeah, I work with text for coding, but so that's one domain. But so I think from me, that not the best idea will come for an app.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying there. So a few years ago, I was in Germany for something. I don't know what it was. Ended up talking to a professor who was interested in downed German World War II aircraft. So we talked about the idea of image maps. And I think image maps in this context can be really, really powerful. We talked about developing a system where you have you have a photograph and you have a plane, a ground, a pilot maybe, and the sky. So how about if we encode the sky with the weather, if known, the ground location, the aircraft information about the aircraft, and the actual pilot information about the pilot? You know, this should be relatively easy to have at the back of the card, so to speak. So to develop information interactions that are entirely visual, I think is very important and useful. But you then still come into the addressability issue, and you still come into the interactions and all of that stuff, which I think I'd be very happy to work in this community because some of it would become textual anyway. But you know, being a visual person who used to do 3D and video and photography now, to kind of communicate what we're doing now in memes or video, no. Right? That's Hollywood budget. I have a feeling Brandel is about to, his head is about to radiate thoughts on this.
I wanted to talk about what you were saying, Leon, about tabs and browsers and back buttons and stuff like that, and the idea of navigation as it's presented there. And this is something that I feel like everybody's been adequately overt about, is that spatial computing is going to require a rethink of a lot of things from the ground up. That's going to be a multi-year, if not multi-decade project of understanding what we do with the space and what sort of relevant constraints we need to abide by. Because the idea of the back button, the idea of tabs, these are all multiplexing a very limited amount of real estate. And you know, it is also, you know, not only is it necessary because nobody's come up with anything else, but also because people are familiar with this. You know, like if we hadn't had those and we suddenly just got VR the way we're doing spatial computing the way that we've got it now, maybe we wouldn't reach for just recapitulating, you know, tabs and browsers and back buttons and things like that. And we might have another go at something else. But because this is so intimately familiar, this is the path through which, you know, the idea of information navigation must grow. But it's, I think, not unreasonable to say it's unlikely to be the final form of how we browse, how we navigate. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the other concerns I have is that, you know, the web is now so substantially dominated by a very few number, like much like the rest of the balkanization of people's experiences on computers with, you know, one or two companies maintaining entire ecosystems. Similarly, like much of the web is actually run through a fairly small number of websites and web providers. You know, there's a famous quote by my that Cory Doctorow likes to use. It was actually by my old university tutor. I remember I was old enough to remember when the internet wasn't just 5 websites, each containing screenshots of the other 4. And one of the challenges that kind of flows from that is that the people who are actually really expansively deciding what the web is, the actual fabric of it, is similarly limited unless folks have the ability to kind of play and expand on what ways various aspects of web technologies are being built. And so, like, I think the web is good today, and I think that everybody who builds a browser today has done a really good job of integrating those things. But I also think that there is more to be done with space and people to be able to kind of play with that. And I'd echo like what Frode said about the special benefits and affordances that flow from visual text in the form of glyphs arranged on some kind of display surface. I really love Stephen Roger Fisher's A History of Writing, as well as Ong, what's his name? Walter Ong, and his Orality and Literacy, because it's because they talk about how drastically different the outcomes are for a society that has literacy, even available at its periphery, but in particular at its core. When something is a primary illiterate society, then really, really magical things happen in terms of the ability for them to understand the idea of truth, or have some sense of permanence. And I think that, you know, spatial computing has the ability to take that even further in terms of people being able to understand veracity and origin, you know, provenance of information of a kind and in a way that a book like this, you know, we have some clues to, but it's limited insofar as there's only so much real estate in it, and you can't link books, and you can't look at 10 pages at once. You can only look at 2. You can kind of stick your fingers in them to be able to flip back and forth. But the kind of recall and recourse to being able to kind of refer to all of these different pieces of media and have an intrinsic sense of the shape of provenance, I think is something that is quite special, and something that has been only barely imaginable for most people up until right now.
These are really, really important points, and I just don't think we should leave behind the idea of what we leave behind, to coin a phrase because I wasn't sure what I was talking about. So much of the interactive stuff dies and disappears. I really think that something like PDFs, because they are so boring, should, you know, when we publish a thing, put it in a way that can literally be printed onto metal or wood or paper or whatever, it doesn't matter, but it can be, so it's the most neutral substrate ever. But we have to build absolutely insanely incredible dimensional interactions on top of that. And of course, there's nothing wrong with having an intricate 3D models as part of a thing. I'm not saying it has to be reduced to this horrible common denominator. But we need, and this is the thing I wanted to think about before Apple's public presentation, and I think we did that really well, come up with an idea of who owns what in the space. And what we talked about in that regard was you open a document, whatever format it is, a document in a space, now it's probably owned by you. And the space it is in is probably owned just by the headset. It's quite simple. But what happens when you do the act of taking an image out of this thing and putting it over there? Is it connected to the book, to the headset, to the room, to the software package that you're in right now? I think these are absolutely crucial issues. And this is why the whole notion of Windows in Swift/Apple owned versus Windows on the web, because the whole information ghetto thing that scares me is, if I'm going into Fabien's and I have this cube and I do amazing things and information is there, I need to take it with me. And I want to take it with me in a way that retains some of the spatial information. But space in a virtual environment isn't 3D or even 4D, because it's the ownership issue that we just talked about. So when I take it into something that Fabien has built, what did it mean that this was a code in purple? Is the key thing that it was there, or the fact that it was code in purple? These things, and the only way I think these can be defined is by doing it, playing with it, trying to interact with it, messing it up, disagreeing, and doing it again. We're running low on time. I will give you the mic, Leon, absolutely. I just wanted to say that Peter was talking about some voice interfaces. And here's the thing, I asked Siri this morning, how much time do I have before I have to leave? And Siri couldn't tell me. So I texted Bruce Horns, because he's on the Siri team now. It seemed like all the context is known in the system. It knows my calendar. It knows when my next thing and all of that stuff. So I look forward to that kind of queries in a spatial relationship, a spatial environment, which can happen if it knows the environment and it knows the data. Sorry, done. Leon, please.
These are really good points. Yeah, one last note. Based on your reply and Brendan's reply, I think going back to the ultimate knowledge sharing app, and if money is not a problem, I would definitely target or go at it from a browser level. I would just like Wolfik, they created their own WebXR browser in the Quest, just to pursue and play with their own ideas of extensions for WebXR, or how it could be better. I would do the same with this knowledge sharing. I would just copy that browser and implement, refactor the whole tab system and start from, what if tabs are no longer, just tabs, and what if they could be like separated spatially. I think if you start at that level, so an app which is a browser, so basically a fork of a WebXR browser, I think you have the, you will have lots of potential to try out ideas and not getting stuck in W3C forums, which are very useful. But if you really want to show something, then first I think you should make it, and then maybe like show it to the W3C people.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. One thing is, I don't think there's a lot of very useful content for people in WebXR right now, and I think that's because of the gulf between authoring. Those kinds of documents and the kinds of informational documents are the kind that Wikipedia is composed of, and other informational sources. It's exorbitantly difficult for people to be able to create something that is just a bunch of text. Ironically, it's probably the harder thing in comparison to a bunch of geometry or loading a cool model that they found on Sketchfab or built in Blender. And so, yeah, like I agree with you, except for the WebXR part, because I think it's an amazing place for people with the time and tendencies and skill bases to be able to experiment with it. But I don't see it as being the home for information that the web is actually. I don't know that there's ever going to be a leap from there to there, and that's not a corporate position. That's just simply on the basis of what WebGL sort of requires of people and things like that. Yeah, I think that documents and information. I'm really interested in some of the, like, if you're familiar with it's not David, Mark Fisher, right? Is it UbiComp? The fellow who is responsible for that stuff no, Mark Fisher is the philosopher. Anyway, the 1990s era guy died in like 99, unfortunately, so I didn't live to see any of this. But his idea of tabs, pads, and notes, and one of the things that was interesting about them is that while all of the Apple devices correspond to those things, they all cost $1,000 each, and so that we don't have the ability to treat them with this sort of cavalier disinterest that we do sheets of paper. And I think VR and spatial computing afford us the opportunity to be able to kind of develop that more freewheeling sort of relationship with a very large number of very lightweight entities that nevertheless have these tangible positions and physical and sort of properties. And so I'd love to see that.
That's both ironic, of course, using a very expensive device to make something cheap, but it's also really important. And there's so many levels of cheap. There's cheap financial. There's also cheap in terms of the energy to do it. It can be time expensive if it's clumsy. A lot of my work, I think about how much sugar do you need to burn in the brain to complete the act. The less sugar you need to do a thing, the more sugar you have to do thinking things. So that cheapness, yeah, I think that is. I'm so glad you brought that up, Randall, because the whole idea of putting a lot of stuff on the wall, even in VR, it can be really time consuming. There's got to be better ways to put it there, get rid of it.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Mark Weiser is the guy. Mark Fisher is the other dead interesting mind on sort of the modern condition, but he's more sort of known for just really, really hating the Arctic monkeys, which I find very funny.
Yeah. We are running out of time. I'm grateful for the kind of practical or reality things we came down to. I still think we should try to do more real things. I'm going to see what I can do. And it's really liberating now to be doing things so much in Reader. Author's getting a good number of downloads. Reader, okay, but there's so many opportunities to help people, even in a flat thing, to read, or rather to browse. And always, of course, there's that sneaking thought of, what if this was in a proper spatial computing environment? You know, if we do a color, how would that be better or worse? So yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really excited by what if you have the ability to send some of the stuff through the simulator to see what it looks like there. There will be some APIs that are different or unavailable, things like that. You know, one of the big changes that again goes that people go into, not in the keynote or in the State of the Union, but in not one of the sessions, is that, for example, well, if you're on Mac, then you don't need multi-touch anyway. There's two maximum interactions at once in the native OS. Whereas, you know, an iPad has the ability to do up to 10 multi-touch points and things like that. But, you know, if you're on a Mac, then you're only dealing with a one trackpad at a time. So at most sort of 2 touch points and things like that. So you should be okay. But yeah, I think it could work really well there. And
I so desperately want to have the map or dynamic view behind my work screen, and you know what you did with it by putting it in was really, really fascinating. But the whole, you got to have more than one display. You know, to have one, I'm writing on this, but to have it there, and then your brilliant interaction with the mural. I don't know if Leon, if you're aware of this, but Bob Horn was on and off part of the group. He does murals, and Peter is very concerned about motion sickness. So that was a brilliant thing that Randall did. He made a basic environment for one of the murals, just a JPEG basically to begin with, so to speak. But the key is you don't have to use a joystick or have a massive room to walk to it. You pinch the whole damn wall towards you and move it around. Right? It is such a fantastic demonstration of VR is different. Absolutely amazing. So I want to be able to experiment with having so many concepts that when I'm not working on them, I want to fade a little bit, so to speak. But when I bring them back, there's a difference between interacting with them and zooming in. So obviously we expect certain things, but to feel how it's going to be absolutely fascinating. It'll be a different world. It'll be literally an eye-opener. And unless anyone else has anything else, let's end on the notion of VR being an eye-opener.
Great session. Have a great week, guys.
Yeah, you too. See you Monday.
Thanks,
I
Pete.
hope. Bye.
yeah, nice to see you, Leon. Thanks, everybody.